Waitress danced with Vampire King's scarred daughter. The song left her father in tears. The tavern at the edge of the cursed forest was quiet that evening, but not lifeless. Candlelight danced on the rough wooden walls, and the smell of roasted meat and old oak filled the air. Patrons whispered over mugs of ale, careful not to disturb the shadows that seemed to linger longer than natural. In the corner, a musician plucked a lute, soft notes winding through the room like a slow, haunting breeze. Leela moved between tables, her tray balanced expertly in her hands. She was small, with warm brown eyes and hair tied back in a loose braid. Life had not been kind to her, but she carried herself with quiet strength. She had learned early how to survive on her own, after her mother's passing had left her with her younger brother to care for. Every day was work, every smile earned, but her heart was full of kindness that she often hid behind polite bows and steady hands. As she approached a table, the tavern doors opened with a sudden gust of cold wind. A hush fell over the room. All eyes turned to the figure stepping into the warm glow of the tavern. She was unlike anyone Leela had ever seen. Tall, with porcelain skin that seemed to shimmer in the candlelight, she wore a flowing black dress that swayed like smoke with each step. Her hair was as dark as midnight, falling past her shoulders, but it was the scar across her left cheek that made every patron instinctively step back. It was not just a mark, it was a story, a warning, a mystery. The girl's presence carried power. Every movement was measured, graceful, almost otherworldly. She paused at the entrance, scanning the room with eyes that seemed too old for her youthful face. Leela felt a shiver, though it was not from the cold. There was something about her, an aura that demanded attention yet invited understanding at the same time. Leela stepped forward, offering a polite nod. "Good evening," she said softly. "Would you like a table?" The girl's lips curved into a faint smile, almost imperceptible, as if the sound of Leela's voice had stirred something long forgotten. She nodded. "A table near the music, please," she said, her voice smooth and deep, carrying an accent that hinted at places far away. Leela led her to a quiet corner, careful not to meet the girl's gaze too directly. There was an intensity in her eyes that made Leela's heart beat faster than it should. The patrons quickly returned to their meals, though whispers lingered like restless spirits. The musician began playing a new song, one that seemed to reach out through the shadows. Leela paused, her fingers brushing the tray she carried. The melody was hauntingly familiar, though she could not place it. It tugged at something inside her, a long-forgotten feeling she could not name. The girl at the corner table rose from her chair without hesitation. Leela's heart skipped a beat as she saw the faint glow of the candlelight against her pale skin. She moved toward the small dance floor, her steps light, almost floating. The scar on her cheek did not mar her beauty. Instead, it seemed to frame it, telling a story that words could never capture. Leela found herself standing near the dance floor, her hands empty and trembling slightly. She had always admired dancers from afar but never dared to step into the space herself. Yet something inside her stirred, a boldness she had not felt in years. The girl's eyes met hers. For a brief moment, it was as if time itself had stopped. The music swirled around them, filling the space with a magic that neither fully understood. Without thinking, Leela stepped forward, her hand reaching toward the girl. "May I dance with you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The girl's eyes widened slightly, and then, as if a weight had been lifted, she nodded. "Yes," she said. Leela's heart pounded as she took the girl's hand. Their fingers intertwined, and she felt a spark that was not warmth alone. It was curiosity, trust, and something far deeper, something almost dangerous in its intensity. The music rose, and their bodies moved in sync, cautious at first, then bolder, letting the melody guide them. Leela's steps were careful, but the girl seemed to float around her, gliding effortlessly. The scarred cheek brushed against Leela's hand as they twirled, and she felt an ache of longing she did not understand. Around them, the tavern faded. Candles blurred into pools of gold, whispers disappeared, and the music became the only reality. Every note seemed to speak directly to them, telling a story of loss and hope, of past pain and future possibilities. Unseen in the shadowed corner near the entrance, a tall figure watched them silently. He was regal and imposing, every inch of him carrying authority and danger. His eyes, dark and deep, followed the girl with an intensity that would have unnerved anyone else. Yet tonight, something softened the harsh lines of his face. Memories of laughter, of light, of a time before tragedy, flickered in his mind. The song, the one now binding the two girls in a dance, was one he had played long ago for the scarred girl, his daughter. Tears, long restrained, threatened to fall as he remembered a happier time he had buried beneath duty and pride. Leela and the girl moved as though connected by something invisible, a thread spun from sorrow and longing. With each step they spoke to each other without words, their emotions laid bare in the curve of an arm, the tilt of a head, the brush of hands. The tavern's warmth seemed to melt around them, leaving only the circle of their dance, a world of music and quiet understanding. Patrons, drawn by the intensity of the moment, watched with hushed reverence. Some whispered about the girl's scar, some about the fearless human who dared to meet her gaze. But all were silent in the presence of something sacred, fragile, and undeniable. As the final notes of the song lingered in the air, a sudden cold gust burst through the open tavern doors. Candles flickered, and shadows leapt across the walls. Leela's hand tightened around the girl's, instinctively protective. The tavern door creaked open again, slower this time, revealing a figure cloaked in darkness. His presence was heavy, almost suffocating. He paused at the entrance, eyes fixed on the girl, a subtle smile of recognition on his lips, though it did not reach his cold eyes. The girl stiffened, and Leela felt a chill run down her spine. Something about him was dangerous, yet familiar. The music had ended, but the energy of the dance lingered, pulsing like a heartbeat. The cloaked figure's gaze moved slowly to Leela, lingering with a strange intensity that made her stomach twist. He said nothing, yet his presence spoke of secrets, of power, and of a threat that neither could yet understand. The scarred girl's eyes met Leela's, a silent question in their depths. Who is he? Leela squeezed her hand gently. We'll face him together, she whispered, more to herself than to the girl. Her voice carried courage she did not feel fully, yet it was enough. The girl's lips curved into a faint, almost grateful smile, and for a moment the shadows retreated. From the corner, the tall figure, the father, watched, heart aching and full of unspoken emotion. His daughter, scarred and beautiful, had found a light in a human girl. A hope he thought long lost. But outside, the dark figure lingered, a storm waiting beyond the threshold. And for the first time that night, the tavern was no longer just a place of music and warmth. It had become the starting point of a story that would unravel secrets, awaken long-buried pain, and challenge the very heart of the vampire kingdom. The scarred girl and the human girl shared one last glance, understanding that their connection had begun, but that the world outside the tavern was more dangerous than they could imagine. And then, as the night deepened, the dark figure stepped closer to the door, his shadow stretching toward them like a promise and a threat all at once. The first chapter of their story had ended, but the true journey, the one that would test courage, heart, and loyalty, was only beginning. The night had settled over the cursed forest, but the tavern remained alive with whispers of the dance that had unfolded. The scarred girl, Seraphine, had left with Leela, stepping lightly into the cold air. Leela's heart was still racing, and she struggled to keep pace with the grace of the girl who seemed both delicate and untouchable. You shouldn't have come so close, Seraphine said softly, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. Her eyes, dark and unreadable, studied Leela carefully. I had to, Leela replied, fumbling with the strap of her satchel. It felt wrong to just watch you. You seemed lonely, and the song, I thought you might need someone to dance with. Seraphine's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. You are brave, human. Her voice, though soft, held the echo of authority. Leela felt her cheeks warm under the compliment. They walked through the streets that led to the cliffs overlooking the village, where Seraphine's home awaited. The village was quiet, the forest pressing close on all sides. Shadows moved with a life of their own, shifting like smoke under the moonlight. Seraphine did not speak of the dangers here, she never did, but Leela could feel them. Finally, they reached a tall gate, wrought iron curling like vines, marking the boundary of the vampire palace. It was a place of stone and shadow, with windows like dark eyes watching the night. You should not enter, Seraphine warned, glancing back at Leela. This place, it is not kind to mortals. I want to, Leela said firmly, meeting her gaze. I want to understand you even a little. If you trust me, I'll stay careful. Seraphine studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Very well, come. The gate swung open silently, revealing a courtyard bathed in silver moonlight. The palace rose before them, tall and imposing, its towers like jagged teeth against the sky. Shadows moved along the walls as though the building itself breathed. Seraphine led Leela inside, each step echoing on cold stone floors. Stay close, she whispered, her hand brushing lightly against Leela's wrist. There was tension in the touch, familiarity mixed with caution. There are things here you cannot yet understand. As they passed through halls adorned with tapestries and statues of past rulers, Leela noticed the traces of time. Dust lay in corners, and candles burned low, yet the palace did not feel abandoned. It was alive, filled with the faint hum of magic and history. In a chamber filled with moonlight, Seraphine paused. This is where I spend my nights, she said quietly. Alone, except for the shadows that never leave. Leela looked around. The room was sparse, yet elegant. A large window framed the night sky, and in its silver light, Seraphine's scar seemed almost to glow. There was pain there, a memory that reached deep into her soul. Leela felt a pull toward her, a desire to comfort her, though she was unsure how. You carry a heavy burden, Leela said gently. I can see it even if you don't say it aloud. Seraphine's eyes softened briefly. You are perceptive. Most humans see only the surface, the scar, the mask, but you look deeper. The conversation was interrupted by a sudden sound, a soft rustle from the doorway. Leela turned quickly, heart pounding. A figure in black had entered the chamber, silent and deliberate. Seraphine tensed immediately, moving to shield Leela. Stay behind me, she commanded, her voice firmer than before. The figure stepped forward, revealing himself. He was tall, with hair the color of night and eyes that glinted dangerously. Leela instinctively stepped back, but Seraphine did not move. There was recognition in her gaze, a mix of fear and resentment. You again, Seraphine said, her voice low. What do you want? The man smiled faintly. Merely to see the family I was denied. And to remind you, some debts are never forgotten. His words were smooth, but there was a threat in every syllable. Leela's grip on Seraphine's hand tightened. Who is he? She asked quietly. Someone from my past, Seraphine replied, her voice hardening. A half-brother, exiled by my father long ago. He carries envy, hatred, and a desire to claim what he believes is his. The vampire king stepped out from the shadows, his presence immediately filling the room. His cloak flowed behind him like dark water, and his eyes, sharp and calculating, studied the intruder. You dare enter my home, he demanded, voice echoing against the stone walls. After all these years, the half-brother did not flinch. I do not fear you, he said. I only seek what was taken from me. Tension rippled through the room. Seraphine's eyes flicked to Leela, silently warning her to stay calm. Leela's heart raced. She had faced challenges before, but this was unlike anything she could have imagined. You must leave, the vampire king said, his tone commanding. This is not your place. The man shook his head. I will not leave until I see what I came for. The girl, your daughter, and the throne she holds. Seraphine's hands clenched, her body tense. Leela saw a flash of vulnerability in her eyes, fear mixed with resolve. She wanted to step forward to protect her, but Seraphine gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Stay behind me," she whispered again. The half-brother's gaze swept the room, landing on Leela. "And who is this?" he asked, a hint of curiosity in his voice. "A human. You bring mortals into the palace." "She is a friend," Seraphine said, her voice steady despite the storm in her heart. "And you will not harm her." The Vampire King's eyes softened just slightly as he looked at Leela. He could see the courage in her stance, the loyalty in her expression. Perhaps, he thought, she could be trusted. The intruder laughed softly, a cold, echoing sound. "Friendship does not protect from power," he said, "but I suppose we shall see how brave she truly is." Suddenly, the floor beneath them trembled. Shadows began to writhe along the walls, stretching like living things. The palace seemed to pulse with energy, responding to the tension in the room. Seraphine's scarred face paled as she realized the curse within her was stirring. Leela's hand found hers again, steadying her. "What's happening?" she asked. "The curse," Seraphine whispered. "It awakens when danger approaches, when my enemies are near." The shadows twisted into shapes, dark figures rising from the floor, their forms both terrifying and beautiful. They reached toward the intruder, then recoiled, bound by some unseen rule. The Vampire King moved swiftly, placing himself between his daughter and the half-brother. "You will not harm her," he growled, "or I will end this here." The intruder's smile widened. "We shall see," he said, his voice a low challenge. Seraphine's curse pulsed stronger and she winced in pain. Leela instinctively leaned closer, whispering words of comfort. "You're not alone," she said. "I'm here. We'll face this together." For a moment the shadows calmed, responding to Leela's courage and the bond forming between them. Seraphine drew a deep breath, regaining some control over the curse that had haunted her for years. The half-brother's eyes narrowed. "So the human has a role in this game," he murmured, almost to himself. "Interesting." The Vampire King's hand rested lightly on his daughter's shoulder, a silent promise of protection. Yet he knew this night would not be the last confrontation. The palace, the curse, and the hidden family secrets were threads in a tapestry that had yet to reveal its full design. Seraphine looked at Leela, a mixture of gratitude and worry in her eyes. "You should leave," she said gently. "This place, it is dangerous, and I cannot promise your safety." "I stay," Leela replied firmly. "I want to be here, I want to help." Her words hung in the air like a spell, soft yet unyielding. The Vampire King studied her for a long moment, then inclined his head slightly. Perhaps, he thought, the human could be the anchor his daughter so desperately needed. Outside, the night deepened, and the forest whispered against the stone walls of the palace. The intruder retreated for now, but his presence lingered like a shadow, a promise that the coming days would test courage, loyalty, and heart. Leela and Seraphine stood together, hands still entwined, facing the uncertainty that lay ahead. The bond between them had grown stronger in the crucible of fear and magic. And in the silence, the palace seemed to breathe a quiet warning. The shadows were not gone, the curse was not tamed, and the story that had begun with a single dance was far from over. The palace was quiet after the chaos of the night, but its silence was heavy, thick with tension. Seraphine paced the moonlit corridors, her footsteps echoing against the cold stone. Each step was measured, careful, as though the walls themselves held secrets that could reach out and strike. Leela followed closely behind, her small hand brushing the sleeve of Seraphine's cloak. She was tired, but her determination kept her moving. This palace was strange and dangerous, full of shadows that seemed alive. Yet Leela was not afraid, not entirely. She felt that staying with Seraphine was more important than fear. "You should rest," Seraphine said quietly, though she did not stop pacing. "The curse, it reacts unpredictably when I am exhausted. I do not want you caught in its path." "I'm fine," Leela said firmly. "I can keep up. I want to understand. I want to help." Seraphine paused and turned toward her. For a long moment she regarded Leela with a mixture of caution and admiration. "You are brave, human," she said softly, "or perhaps foolish. Most would have fled after last night." Leela smiled faintly, though her heart still raced. "Perhaps, but I cannot leave you alone. Not now." The two of them moved deeper into the palace, reaching a hidden chamber adorned with tapestries depicting the royal lineage. Shadows played across the walls, giving the figures on the cloth an eerie, lifelike quality. Seraphine traced a finger along the edge of one tapestry, her eyes distant. "My family," she whispered. "This place is filled with memories, not all of them kind." Leela stepped closer. "Tell me," she said gently. "Maybe sharing them will make the shadows smaller." Seraphine's eyes met hers, and for the first time Leela saw vulnerability behind the strength. "When I was young," she began, "I was ordinary, almost human in my innocence. The curse was not yet strong. My father, he loved me in his way, but he feared my potential. He feared the world would use it against me. So I was kept here, sheltered, watched, and trained to be something more than human, something bound by magic and duty." Leela nodded, listening intently. "That must have been lonely." "Lonely is too small a word," Seraphine said. "It was a cage, and then my brother came. Half-brother. He envied me, resented my freedom within these walls, though freedom was limited. He sought power, influence, anything that could give him what he thought was rightfully his, and then he was cast out." Leela felt a shiver. "He wants to hurt you." "Yes," Seraphine said quietly, "but not just me. He wants what he cannot have, what my father gave to me: position, power, even the chance to choose my own life." The air grew heavy as they spoke. The palace seemed to respond, shadows stretching along the walls, twisting like living tendrils. Leela instinctively stepped closer to Seraphine. "We'll face him together," she whispered, feeling her courage swell. Seraphine's eyes softened and she reached for Leela's hand. "Your courage, it is unusual. Most humans would flee from the shadows, from the stories. Yet you stand beside me despite everything. That is rare." Their hands remained linked, a silent connection forming between them, stronger than words. Leela felt warmth spread through her chest, a mixture of hope, admiration, and something deeper she did not yet name. Suddenly the shadows around them shifted violently. A low, eerie hum filled the chamber. Seraphine stiffened, her eyes widening in alarm. "The curse," she murmured almost to herself. "It senses him. It knows he is near." Before Leela could respond, a figure appeared at the entrance. It was the half-brother, moving like a shadow slipping through the light. His eyes glinted with dark amusement as he surveyed the room. "So, you brought the human with you," he said. "Interesting. I did not expect companionship." "You will not harm her," Seraphine said firmly, stepping in front of Leela. Her voice was steady, but her pulse raced. The intruder's smile widened. "I do not harm without reason, but I will take what is mine if the chance arises." The vampire king appeared behind them, his presence commanding and heavy. He stepped forward, placing himself beside his daughter. "You have no claim here," he said coldly, "and you will leave before this escalates." "You cannot banish me from blood and shadow," the half-brother said smoothly. "Not now. The curse, it is awakening, and I can use it to my advantage. Your daughter's power belongs to me if I am patient." The palace seemed to shiver at his words. The walls pulsed, shadows twisting more violently, reacting to the tension. Leela's heart pounded, but she refused to look away. "Do you not see?" Seraphine said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and anger. "You were never denied. You were given a choice, a path, and you rejected it. Now you threaten everything, all of us." The half-brother's eyes flashed with anger. "I do not need your approval," he shouted. "I only need what is mine." The curse surged suddenly, shadows rising from the floors and walls, twisting toward the half-brother. He recoiled, momentarily caught off guard, but his expression hardened. Clever, he muttered, but cleverness alone cannot protect her forever. Leela took a step forward, gripping Seraphine's hand. You are not alone, she said. We will face this together. The words seemed to have weight. The shadows paused, responding to her courage. Seraphine blinked, startled by the strength in the human's voice. For a moment, it was as if Leela's bravery had anchored her, allowed her to regain control of the curse. The Vampire King studied Leela silently, a flicker of hope in his eyes. Perhaps, he thought, she was the bridge his daughter needed, the anchor between her humanity and the power she carried. The half-brother, sensing the unity between Leela and Seraphine, snarled silently. He stepped back, but the threat remained in his eyes. This is not over, he hissed, disappearing into the shadows as silently as he had arrived. The chamber was quiet once more. Seraphine sank to the floor, leaning against the wall, exhaustion washing over her. Leela knelt beside her. Are you all right? She asked softly. Seraphine nodded, though her breathing was heavy. I think so, for now. The curse, it is tiring me more than usual. It feeds on danger, and he brought plenty. Leela brushed a strand of hair from Seraphine's face. You don't have to bear it alone, she said. I'll stay with you. Always. For the first time in years, Seraphine allowed herself a small, genuine smile. Perhaps it is possible to share this burden, she whispered, with someone I trust. The Vampire King watched from the doorway, his face unreadable, yet softer than before. The human girl had earned a place not just in his daughter's life, but perhaps in the palace itself. As dawn approached, the first light of day filtered through the high windows. The shadows retreated, but the memory of the night's confrontation lingered like a warning. Seraphine's curse had been partially controlled, thanks to Leela's courage, but its full power remained untamed. The half-brother's threat was not gone, it had only been delayed. Seraphine leaned back against the wall, exhaustion weighing on her. There is much I have not told you, she said softly, glancing at Leela. Secrets of this palace, of my family, of the curse itself. Perhaps you are brave enough to hear them. I want to know, Leela said firmly. If understanding can help, I will listen. And so, as the first rays of sun touched the cold stone floor, the two girls sat together, hands entwined, sharing stories of loss, loneliness, and hope. Bonds were being forged, courage tested, and hearts opening in ways neither had expected. But beyond the palace walls, in the deep forests and shadowed paths, the half-brother was already plotting his next move. The game was far from over, and the shadows of the past were not yet laid to rest. The bond between Seraphine and Leela had grown stronger in the crucible of danger. But the curse, the palace, and the threats lurking in the night would challenge them again, demanding every ounce of courage, trust, and love they could muster. And as they sat together in the pale light of dawn, the palace seemed to whisper a quiet warning. The shadows were still alive, the past was not finished, and the story that began with a dance was far from over. The palace had been quiet for days, but the stillness was uneasy. Every corridor, every shadowed corner seemed to watch, waiting. Seraphine sat by a window in her chamber, moonlight washing her scar in silver. Her hands trembled slightly as she traced the line across her cheek, the mark that had always reminded her of limitations, of a life half hidden. Leela entered quietly, carrying a small lantern. The light flickered across the stone walls, illuminating the intricate tapestries that whispered stories of long-dead kings and queens. You should rest, Leela said softly, setting the lantern down. Your curse, it has been acting strangely. I cannot rest while he is near, Seraphine replied, her voice tight with worry. My half-brother, he grows bolder. He senses the curse and he wants to use it. Leela knelt beside her, brushing her fingers lightly over Seraphine's hand. Then we will face him together. Whatever happens, I will not leave your side. Seraphine's eyes softened, a mix of gratitude and uncertainty in their depths. You have been my light in the shadows, she said quietly. I never imagined anyone could be so brave, so human, and yet so unshakably strong. Before Leela could respond, a cold wind swept through the chamber. The lantern flickered violently, shadows stretching along the walls like dark fingers. Seraphine's lips parted in alarm. "He's here," she whispered. "He's coming." The floor trembled beneath their feet, and the walls seemed to pulse with unseen energy. The curse within Seraphine had grown restless, reacting to the danger outside. Her shadow stretched unnaturally, reaching for the corners of the room, and she winced in sudden pain. Leela held her hand firmly. "Focus on me," she said. "I am here. You are not alone." The connection between them strengthened the girl's control over her curse. Slowly, Seraphine's shadow receded, though a faint ripple of darkness remained. She took a deep, shuddering breath. "Thank you," she whispered. Suddenly, the heavy doors to the chamber burst open. The half-brother entered, his presence like a storm. His eyes glinted with anger and greed. "So we meet again," he said smoothly. "And the human still clings to you. How predictable." "Leave now," Seraphine commanded, standing tall despite her exhaustion. "You will not take what is mine." "You speak boldly," he said, circling the room like a predator. "Do you think your curse will protect you? Do you think your little friend can stop me?" Leela stepped forward. "She is not alone," she said firmly, "and neither am I afraid of you." The half-brother's expression twisted, a mixture of amusement and irritation. He reached toward the room with a gesture, and shadows began to rise from the floors and walls. Dark forms, twisted and threatening, slithered toward them. The palace seemed to respond to his power, the very stones bending to his will. Seraphine's eyes widened, panic threatening to overtake her, but Leela grasped her hand tightly. "Together," Leela said. "We face it together." The words, simple but filled with determination, acted like a tether. Seraphine's curse, responsive to the bond of trust and courage, pulsed but did not spiral. She drew a deep breath, centering herself, allowing her magic to respond, not as a weapon but as a shield. The half-brother paused, sensing the sudden shift in power. "Interesting," he muttered. "The human, she changes things. She stabilizes it." Seraphine looked at Leila, awe and relief mingling in her expression. "I didn't know this could be done," she whispered. "Your courage, it anchors me." The half-brother's lips curled into a snarl. "No matter," he hissed. "I will find a way. The throne, the power, it belongs to me." The vampire king entered silently, stepping between his daughter and the intruder. His eyes, dark but resolute, met the half-brother's. "Not while I live," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You will not take my daughter, nor the palace, nor the power she inherits by right and by strength." The half-brother laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "You cannot protect her forever. Time will favor me as it always has." The shadows rose again, but this time Leela did not falter. She stepped forward, her hand clasped in Seraphine's, drawing strength from the connection. "We will not let fear control us," she said. "We choose courage. We choose each other." The words seemed to resonate with the palace itself. The shadows faltered, hesitation rippling through them. Seraphine felt the surge of power stabilize, no longer chaotic but directed, focused by trust and the bond they shared. With a deep, commanding breath, Seraphine extended her hands, and a wave of controlled energy swept through the chamber. The shadows recoiled, retreating into the walls, the floor, and corners. The half-brother's eyes widened in surprise. "How?" he murmured. "You underestimated the human," Seraphine said quietly, her voice steady, filled with a newfound confidence. "Courage is stronger than fear, and love, even a bond forged in trust, can tame shadows." The vampire king's stern expression softened. He stepped closer, placing a protective hand on Seraphine's shoulder. "You have grown," he said quietly. "Both of you." The half-brother, defeated for now, retreated, disappearing into the corridors of the palace. His threat lingered like a cold wind, but he had been pushed back. Exhausted but victorious, Seraphine sank to the floor, leaning against the wall. Leela knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's over for now," she said softly. "We survived." Seraphine smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and exhaustion. For now, she echoed. Her eyes met Leela's, holding gratitude, admiration, and something deeper. You have saved me more than once, not with magic but with courage, with heart. Leela shook her head, laughing softly. I didn't save you alone. We saved each other. The Vampire King watched them quietly, understanding dawning in his eyes. For too long, he had held his daughter at a distance, fearing both her power and the world outside. But now he saw that trust, courage, and love, things he had once thought weakness, were exactly what she needed to survive. Come, he said gently, rest now. There is time to heal and time to prepare. The future still waits for you both, and it will not be without trials. But together, you are stronger than any shadow. Leela helped Seraphine to her feet, supporting her as they walked toward the chambers prepared for them. Each step felt lighter than before. The palace, though still ancient and full of secrets, seemed a little less threatening, warmed by the courage and connection between the human and the vampire. In the moonlit hall, they paused. Seraphine turned to Leela, her scar catching the silver light. I was afraid of so many things, she admitted. Of my curse, of my brother of the shadows, but I was also afraid of trusting someone. You trusted me, Leela said softly, squeezing her hand. And I will continue to. Seraphine's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I don't know what the future holds, she said quietly, but I know that I want you by my side for it. The Vampire King, standing nearby, allowed himself a small, unguarded smile. The girl he had once feared to lose, the daughter who carried a curse and a scar, had found a light in a human who dared to believe in courage and love. He realized, finally, that hope was not lost, and perhaps it had been waiting in the form of a human girl all along. As dawn began to paint the palace walls in soft pinks and golds, Seraphine and Leela looked out from the balcony. The cursed forest still stretched endlessly below, but the light of morning made it seem less menacing. The shadows had receded, but the memory of the danger remained, a reminder that life was fragile and courage was precious. Leela leaned slightly toward Seraphine. Do you feel it? She asked. The curse is weaker now. Your control, it's growing. Yes, Seraphine said, a quiet awe in her voice. Because you believed in me, because we believed together. They stood in silence for a moment, hands entwined, hearts aligned. There was no need for words. Trust, courage, and a shared bond had conquered fear and darkness. And though the half-brother still lingered in the shadows, plotting, the bond between Seraphine and Leela promised that they would face whatever came together. For the first time, the Vampire King allowed himself to feel hope. And perhaps in that fragile hope, the future of the palace, the family, and the two girls was brighter than it had ever been. The dance that had begun in a humble tavern had led them through fear, shadow, and revelation. Now it ended with strength, courage, and a bond that could withstand both curses and darkness. And as sunlight spilled across the scarred walls of the palace, Seraphine and Leela shared a quiet smile, knowing this was only the beginning of their story, a story of trust, redemption, and transformation.